Calling all units, calling all units. Donut shop has a fresh dozen. Go ahead and take a 1040.
And we're back.
Here we are.
Salute, my brother. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah. Boom. There it is. All right. So you're going to drink?
Yeah.
You're going to drink and I'll wait. If you know, it's bad luck if you don't drink. And then apparently if you don't look the person in the eye.
7 years of bad.
What is it?
Sex.
Bad sex.
Bad sex.
Mm-hmm. With that person.
With the person that didn't look you in the eyes or whatever.
Oh, man. We got a good episode. Woo! It's going to be good. We have Dave on the show. And it has an interesting story to tell. Okay, and we're going to get into all about this story. Right, Jay?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get into this story later on, but you want to give like a little snippet in the beginning to let the audience know, hey, this is some good stuff you're about to hear.
Yeah, so I was a police officer for 20 years. I was friends with a tiny homeless man, 4'9" homeless man. And for 15 years, just regular friendship. But after 15 years, one day he just said, Dave, it's time I tell you my life story. He told me the craziest story I could ever have heard as a police officer. 10 days later, he gets killed in a really bizarre way. I spent 5 years of my life researching the most interesting man on the to ever,
come across your path.
So it's quite an incredible story.
It is. It got like a little bit of CIA in there.
Yeah.
You got some Vietnam craziness that I heard.
Yeah, from the bloody jungles of Vietnam, I did the investigation to Iraq, Venezuela, Cambodia, and that whole rabbit hole of conspiracies.
4'9", Richard Flaherty.
So this story,
Talk to me.
Story starts when I go to this new city from Surfside. I transfer over to Aventura. That's really where the story starts as a rookie cop. And as every rookie cop knows, you need money, so you're working off-duty jobs nonstop. So I was working off-duty job at the movie theater in uniform, and this tiny little dude would come in and just like you just see somebody over and over, and that's how relationships start. You don't just go approach people you don't know, a head nod, or this or that. There was something different about this guy besides the fact that he was tiny. He was 4'9". He also was athletic built. So you have, in real life, you have dwarfism, you have proportionate dwarfism, and you have non-proportionate. You think of like a Peter Dinklage.
Yeah.
My friend would be considered proportionate dwarf. All his limbs are the exact size of ours, just shrunk. So see him every day, started the nods, and I started asking him, because he was always in the movies. So I would ask him about the movie he just saw, and that's kind of how a relationship started. Something happened, he would come into the mall. Something happened in the mall. They felt that he was homeless or that he was spending so much time. They kicked him out. I know he fought his way back into the mall legally. And then I would see him out on the streets, and we would talk more and more. And this guy, this little homeless guy, and when I say homeless, he wasn't dirty or anything. He took care of himself and his appearance. This little guy had such knowledge about the world. Now, the other thing I want to stop and say is I try getting him off the streets. I try to say, hey, we have shelters. Hey, I have these programs. I have this. What can I do to help you get off the streets? But as you mentioned, you said the word Baker, and cops know what that means in Florida. For the rest of us, it's a mental illness where a Baker Act means that the person is a danger to themselves or to others, and if we left them alone, untreated, it would cause harm to themselves. My little guy never met that criteria that, I could force him into a hospital or into some type of doctor's care. So we just stayed friends, and I kind of had that, you just kind of get that feeling that the guy doesn't want you to peer too much into his past, and I didn't. So we would just talk about politics and laugh a lot. So fast forward 15 years of this friendship of just meeting for coffee, having a sandwich, and he looks me in the eye one day and he says, Dave, I got to tell you who I really am. So as cops, we're a skeptical bunch. So I'm like, all right, here he is. He's going to tell me he's wanted here. I killed these people, and I'm about to turn myself in. I don't know what he's going to say, but I'm super nervous because I really did enjoy talking to the guy. I really thought he had a lot of interesting philosophical ideas that he would actually, constantly prep me and test me. So here's a homeless guy kind of teaching me.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about being humble is everyone on this earth can teach you something. So I was picking up stuff from him and learning stuff from him. So what does he say? He says, Dave, I was the smallest man to ever serve in the U.S. military, and my mind's like, impossible. There's no such thing as 4'9" military people. But he keeps going. He goes, yeah, I served over in Vietnam with the 101st Airborne, and then after my first tour, I went back to Special Forces School, became a Green Beret. I was like, a Green Beret. Yeah. So it's like now the story's getting even crazier. And then after, I started working undercover operations with the ATF, and I don't want you to look into those things because, those things, some of those things are still classified. And then I did some private military contract work. I did some private military contract for the CIA, and I'm like, he's got his story down, and I love my friend, but man, he's obviously much more delusional than I can possibly believe.
Were you breaking his balls because?
No. I was just, listen, because this is a person I really,
I just imagine you
respected. Yeah.
Here's the thing: is that we've been friends for 15 days,
right.
and you're already A. So I can imagine.
Right. The difference with this is. You're dealing with somebody who's maybe mentally ill, delusional, and you just feel bad about breaking that bubble.
Yeah. I just think it was for 15 years. Maybe you guys had a good relationship.
We did, but when he starts telling me this information, I'm getting nervous that maybe he wasn't really, as mentally stable as I thought.
Okay,
because it's just so, it's so far fetched.
The guy saw this in a movie and just created a persona.
He's telling me the Captain America story. Basically, he's telling me he's Captain America. So. I mean, I just left that, with a real shaken feeling, of feeling bad because, it's like from now on, I kind of look at him as somebody really much more damaged than I initially thought.
Yeah.
So I go home that night and I'm taking off my uniform and I'm not even going to think, but whatever, let me check on the, Google, who is the smallest guy? And all of a sudden, these old newspaper articles, smallest man wants to join the military, smallest man wants to become a Green Beret, and it's him.
Oh, my God.
So I'm like, holy shit, the most interesting human being on the face of the earth, the most remarkable, the most incredible, has been living here in Aventura on the streets, and he slept under a tree, and 1 million people every day would pass him by and not even give him a look. And this is the most interesting man in the entire earth. Yeah. So I ran back to him the next day, and he looked at my face. He goes, hey, you didn't believe me. I knew it when I was telling you the story. Now you believe me. So I was like, yeah. And he goes, look. I said, Rich, why'd you tell me? He goes, look, I feel like my life is a cautionary tale of what went wrong when I got out of the military in Vietnam and how I eventually became homeless. And somehow, he goes, Dave, somehow I want you to tell my story. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I mean, eventually I'll just collect his information and I'll just, try to find a real filmmaker, a real writer to take over this thing. And, for the next 2 years, I'll interview Richard. That's the mistake we all make, that we think we have time with people and you just never know. So 10 days after he made this incredible revelation, he gets killed in a really bizarre hit and run. And we could jump into the hit and run, a little bit later, and I have no problem talking about it. I usually don't promote it because it's just such an ugly, negative thing, but we can certainly talk about it as cops, especially since the suspect worked for Miami-Dade Homicide Unit as a civilian employee. So that was kind of the initial plan. He gets killed in this hit and run, and I'm like, well, that's over. I mean, how much information do I have about this guy? I just have some notes. I only had 2 minutes of video that one day I used my phone to videotape him. How am I going to... I made a promise to the man that I'll get a story out to the world. Yeah. How am I going to honor this promise? And I was like, there was times I was just like, well, it's just not going to happen. But he had a storage unit. I was the only one who knew he had a storage unit because when he got killed, there was a day and a half that it was an open homicide. It was an open traffic homicide. So I told my guys, hey, I know he's got a unit. He told me about a unit where he keeps stuff. So we went over there, and that's where we kind of started our investigation. And inside that unit was almost like breadcrumbs of his whole life. There was the documentation from the beginning of his life to the end. It was all over the place. It wasn't organized. It took me a long time. And there was just amazing and shocking things I found there. And I'll go into, somebody remind me about the shocking stuff.
Okay.
So that's kind of just how this whole project got started of me. I spent the next 5 years. I mean, even till today, I'm still chasing down this trail because all of Richard's story will never be told because he took some stuff to the grave with him. Yeah. But it is just the most bizarre, remarkable, the most inspiring, the most tragic, the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows.
So it took you 5 years to put all this stuff together?
What I did is I initially released the documentary thinking, okay, I'm done. I made my promise to the man.
Yeah.
I told his story. So what happens? in the documentary, there were some missing pieces
Yeah.
that I speculated, but I wasn't 100% sure. And I wanted that documentary to be 1,000% black and white. As a cop, if you can't prove it, then it's not real.
Yeah.
So it's really black and white, but there's missing holes in the story of the documentary. After the documentary, and I opened up a social media page for him to help promote, like on Facebook, The Giant Killer. And the name The Giant Killer, if people want to know, that was his nickname in high school.
Yeah.
That he was given, and it's in his yearbook, and that had to do with something about, as a freshman, he got into a fight with a bully and blew the guy's knee out.
Yeah.
And he was a tough little dude.
Yeah.
So that's how we
David
got
and
the name.
Goliath.
I didn't come up with the name The Giant Killer. So after the documentary, so many people reached out from around the world, and a lot of them were just kooks, and I had to vet them. And some of them just said, hey, I was with him in Venezuela. Hey, I was with him in Iraq when he did this mission. And that's when I said, okay, now I got to write the book. So, it's like that never-ending story, this guy.
So you're going to write a book about it?
So I have the book. I have the book about Richard Flaherty now. It's done.
Okay.
So that's the book you have. You have a
So
prop.
that's the missing the gray area is now black and white in that book. Boom.
Yes.
There it is.
But not. let's
for
go.
camera B.
Right, for camera B. But let's not. There's still things in his life that even I haven't uncovered yet. There's still classified things. There's so many layers to his story, and part of it was him. He would set up little traps. He would put out false information. He was really the most complex human being I've ever heard of.
Wow. Why do you think he picked you?
Okay, so one, I think because I didn't press him.
Yeah.
I think he trusted me in our friendship. And the other thing is he knew he was running out of time. And not because he knew he was going to get hit. Although he did feel he was paranoid. Most people, when we deal with him as cops, say, oh, the CIA is chasing me. He would say the State Department was after him. But he had stage 4 cancer on his head, which he attributed to Agent Orange. So I think in his mind, he knew his time was running out. He was getting treatment, but...
So to go back, so he joins the military. He's an Army Green Beret.
First he goes into the Army, and they never thought he'd make it through basic. Like,
Yeah.
how can... The rucksack, which they carry in the back, is usually around 60, 70 pounds. He's only 97 pounds. How is even all the obstacle courses, how could it even... So no one believed he would make it. He had to get waivers. He had to write to congressmen and stuff for 3 years to get a medical waiver. So somehow he makes it through basic training.
Was he airborne too?
He was airborne.
Yeah,
So then
101st,
then you volunteer for airborne. It's a volunteer paratrooper.
Yeah.
So then he's jumping out of planes with equipment that doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Then they had to strap weights onto him because the first time he jumps out, he wouldn't descend. So he'd just float off. They'd lose him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's 97 pounds.
Yeah.
It's not enough weight.
Yeah.
So then there was, so think about like how insane, how incredible, how inspiring, and how tough of a little fuck he had to be to go through this stuff. So he volunteers. So then he becomes an officer, a lieutenant. His first mission when he goes to Vietnam, because of Richard's life is always the toughest life.
Yeah.
His first mission as a platoon leader is during the Tet Offensive, that most people say is one of the most bloodiest battles in the Vietnam War.
Right.
And, that's obviously why they become homeless, and we can jump into that. But that PTSD, the thing you got to think about as an officer is you're responsible for bringing these men. They trust you with their lives.
Yeah.
Bring them home. And he didn't bring all his guys home.
Yeah.
And for some officers, they'll never live that down, that guilt that they didn't bring. And for Richard, it was, that Tet Offensive, he lost a lot of people. Everyone lost a lot of people in that battle. Yeah. So
he was a tough dude, also a little bit of a dick. I heard of times where when one of the situations that happened, he pulled out his gun, pointed at his commanding officer at the time, and he told him, "Hey, put up the gun, or I'm going to shoot you with my rifle." So there were some little instances where I felt as though maybe over there, like you said, he might have gotten a little bit of screws loose due to the circumstances that he was over there in the war.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. Everyone, that's a good point. That story. Everyone said that he was as tough as you get, but he could be a dick. I mean, he was. I mean, he had to always prove himself.
Yeah,
and he always had to. Everywhere he went, everything he did in the military, he always had to prove himself, and he always had to stand up to everyone. So, yeah, he had that Napoleonic complex, and he did some crazy, crazy shit. And
I mean, if you watch the show,
The documentary,
it's on Prime and
Amazon Prime, The Giant Killer.
Yeah, we watched it. I watched not together, but I watched.
Not
it.
that there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah. You know,
But it was cool. It's good, and
it takes you through some of the stories that happened over there, and that's where I learned where he was, pull out his gun, and he was very ferocious out there in the fields as well.
And so you conducted all those interviews that were in the documentary?
Yeah, so I went across the country doing, here I am just, trying to do this thing, week in, week out. And like sometimes I just felt like, how am I going to get this done? But I would just flew across the country. And what's really important was those Vietnam vets opened up to me because I didn't know. I was a stranger. I don't know if they're going to talk to me. Yeah. But then they started inviting me to their reunions and stuff. And that's when you could really judge a man by the people who served in Vietnam with him. So it was, you have those crazy stories, but the one thing everyone will say is they all respected him and that they all followed him, into battle because he would put himself, in harm's way before anyone else.
That's what I said. So he's 4'9" on paper, NBA paper, I guess. How they fudge the numbers.
Little George Santos.
So
it's called the Santos.
But he's also, what is it called when they go in the foxholes? There was
you're thinking of tunnel rat. So the tunnel rat story is a little controversial because I did ask him about the tunnel because that's the first thing I thought. I was like, oh, you're a tunnel rat. He goes, no, I'm an officer. Officers, we don't go into the tunnels. We assign somebody because I'm responsible for my guys.
Yeah.
But then after the first few months in Vietnam when he fought in the Tet Offensive, most lieutenants, after they're in vicious battle, they get offered jobs in the rear to do some sort of thing. He wouldn't take it. He took a reconnaissance job, a recon. Those are search and destroy guys, those little units. So he took that, and those guys said that he would go into the tunnels. So I think he just couldn't help himself for the challenge.
So he liked to live on the edge. He liked that.
Yeah, so that's... you do see that a lot with the special forces guys that, and guys who've been in war and who survived. There's such a huge adrenaline dump. They could say walking on the razor's edge. That it's almost hard for them to not go back. I interviewed a guy named Chris Tanto Paranto. He was one of the guys, contractors. He was an ex-Army Ranger that was one of the contractors in the Benghazi thing. Oh, yeah. And Richard and Chris told me, man, he goes, man, that adrenaline dump from that battle when you don't know if you're going to come out alive. Yeah. There's no drug, there's nothing on this earth. So in his opinion, he thought Richard, when he was doing his private contract work, my little guy, he was chasing that adrenaline dump. Yeah. And there was also the other aspect that Richard did tell me that he hated communism. And then, when Russia went into Russia went into Africa in the 70s, into Rhodesia and trying to, help the spread of communism through some of these small countries. He went over there to fight as an advisor.
And I don't want to jump any chapters or anything, but there was a time where he gets linked up with the CIA, or supposedly, I don't know.
Supposedly, yeah.
All right, move in. We got him.
Unconfirmed.
Yeah. No, actually, I was caught the tail end of it as I'm coming in, and I got out of my car, and I'm just started looking around. I don't know. I just felt as though, hey, man, we might be touching on some crazy stuff, and they might have tapped your phone calls, and they're like, oh, they're gonna go on that podcast and talk about some CIA stuff. But it's interesting that when you take away everything, right, and then you start talking about him, and you're looking the way he lived, is like it would be a perfect candidate for somebody to work with the CIA. And I think you uncovered it, or somebody said it in the documentary where it's like, you found his passport. Yeah. You want to talk about that real quick?
Right. So,
this is where I'm getting at.
This is the surprise.
Yeah.
So this is...
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, guys, this is what we got. I know the story of him going to Vietnam. I know the story. I know he said some of this stuff about possible undercover missions, but there's no proof of it until we went inside that storage unit. So this is where the whole story, if it could get crazier, it gets crazier. That time I knew him as a tiny homeless man. His passport revealed he was in Cambodia, he was in Iraq, he was in Venezuela. Nobody knows who he was there for. Nobody knows. I mean, there's people who came out of the woodworks who speculated, but there's nothing on paper. There's no paper trail on that. And I did my Freedom of Information Acts with the CIA and the State Department, and I got that standard letter. We can neither confirm nor deny the presence of Richard Flaherty. So yeah, that was really shocking when I found that passport, because you think his missions were over when, he's almost 70 years old and he's still out there.
The dates on the stamped dates were in the time where that you knew him?
Yeah, that's what makes it crazy. When he's living under a tree, he's still doing these missions around the world. Whoa. Who is he working for? Whoa. What were the missions? Why was he in? He was in, I forgot the name of the place in Venezuela, but I spoke to some federal guys. It was a small port city in Venezuela, and they're like, that is one of the most dangerous places for an American to just walk in. But he did work for Bushmaster Rifles, or there was another name of the company before it got sold to Bushmaster, and he was a sales rep, and he helped develop weapons, and he was in the early 70s working with the Venezuelan government with providing arms. So, and then there's so much crazy shit. He trained Cuban, that's 100%. They trained Cuban rebels out in the Everglades for a possible to overthrow the Castro regime. I ended up interviewing a guy. I thought that
confirmed that he worked for the CIA or no?
No, that's not confirmed.
Confirmed or denied. So who's is
the ATF? Listen,
okay,
ATF. There's an ATF agent who I believe 100% that everything he told me, and from his information, because Richard worked with the ATF in the 80s to bust a crime ring at a Fort Bragg that wasn't stealing some weapons, tons of weapons and explosives.
Yeah.
Now that's where even more CIA shady stuff, because if you look at newspaper articles and you look at the 2 Green Berets who got arrested, who were allegedly stealing this, they say Richard Flaherty was a CIA agent. He was using us to get weapons down to the anti-Sandinistas in Central America. This was a CIA operation, but it's all falling on us, so the government doesn't look bad. So the ATF agent and the federal prosecutors in that case deny it. They say, no, it really was these guys were stealing it for profit. So, but there's CIA declassified documents that are still coming out now. There's some stuff that I see now, newspaper articles that the CIA shut down that are now being declassified that talk about Flaherty and some of these meetings in the 80s in Central America. So it is as wild as it gets.
We should cut right into Justin's face. Right. Holy moly!
Well, and then only just because last night I'm watching.
But the whole thing was, here's a homeless person, right?
Yeah.
Homeless gentleman, and he has a passport that he's been all over the world. Those plane tickets cost money.
Yeah.
So that's where the whole question is like, if he's not working for the CIA or somebody, how did he get the money to fly around and go to all these different parts of the world?
I saw his bank account, and there was never any fluctuations. He had about $2,000-$3,000 in his bank account, but there was never any crazy Now, is there an offshore account somewhere sitting with a ton of money? Hey. And I'll tell you, there's so many I could talk for days about the million insane things that happen with me and Richard. But one thing that's not in the book, maybe it is in the book.
Wait a minute, it's starting to make sense now.
Certainly
you pulled
not
up in a nice BMW.
Whoa,
you know this guy
on,
real good. Wait a minute.
Hold on a second. That valet kid lent it to me. Valet kids will lend you any car for $20. So like the last week of his life was the strangest week of his life. Like I finally got a guy from my department that had a really good hook with the governor and with the VA hospital, and they were going to look into Richard's case, and Richard felt he was being denied all sorts of benefits. That was like amazing, and Richard gave me the okay. He said, okay, I'll go to these meetings. I was going to change Richard's life that last week. Everything was turning to the good before he got killed. So maybe 3 days before he gets killed, he tells me, hey, Dave, meet me at this apartment. I'm working my shift, and it's in my zone. He says, meet me at an apartment. Richard had a cell phone, too, a little flip phone. So okay, why am I meeting? So I meet him, and he's in an apartment with a real estate agent. It's not the best apartment, but it's nice. It's $170 back then, in 2015, $175,000 apartment. So he looks at me and goes, Dave, what do you think? I'm thinking of offering them $150. And I'm like, what what is this? Where do you're homeless. Where are you going to get $150,000?
Yeah.
So then later he told me that a buddy of his, a real estate guy, owed him the money and was going to give him the $150. Now I interviewed that real estate guy, and under no circumstances was that part true.
Oh, okay.
Richard did not tell me the truth because that guy didn't know. As a cop, we know when people bullshit us.
Yeah.
When we hit him with a surprise question.
Yeah.
And he didn't blink at all. He goes, buy Richard an apartment. I have apartments. I offered him apartments all the time, and he wouldn't live. Not the nicest ones, but to live rent free, and he wouldn't. Where was that money coming from? No effing clue.
Dun, dun. And that's in the new book. No, I'm just kidding.
And wait for the second book because I won't answer that in the first.
Yeah.
You know.
So I mean, going back, it's almost like you know, it's sad to say because these guys are over there, they're fighting for our country, but they're homeless in the jungle. They're learning to live out in the thing, and maybe he just felt comfortable under that tree, or was he directed to live under the tree out as a homeless guy? Who knows?
Part of his cover.
But but they feel like it's almost like a sense. You get a sense that he felt at home being out under, you know, out on,
100%.
just being homeless.
100%.
Because this is what at one point in my life, this crazy point in my life that I'm in Vietnam, you know, I can't go back there and relive that. But this, I almost feel like that's like I'm at home. I'm back in that time.
They feel safe. Like Richard would, wherever he stayed, he had little traps, little snares. He would put crunchy leaves around him. He had, you know, that's the way he felt safe. He didn't feel secure inside an apartment where he kind of felt trapped. There's a story I just told that I just got, like, and that's the point of this thing. It never ends. I just got another Flaherty story. So this is like 72. A bunch of guys. He's from Stamford, Connecticut. A bunch of guys from the neighborhood are in Miami Beach on like a spring break, whatever it was in 1972. One of the guys who told me the story didn't know Flaherty, but he said one night they told him another guy from Stanford's coming. So Richard just got out of the military. He was just got out of, you know, being a Green Beret. This guy's got the Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, 2 Purple. I mean, crazy decorated Special Forces hero. So the guy opens the door. He hears a knock, opens the door, and there's Flaherty. So this guy, just the most badass dude in the world, the guy thinks it's a high school freshman. Like he doesn't even know you're looking at the baddest dude on the planet.
Yeah.
So he goes, some, you know, fresh-faced high school freshman he says, you know, he's, you know, coming out with us, and that's how he first met Flaherty. So they go out to bars, and they're drinking and everything. And actually, Flaherty got a limousine. I guess he wanted to have a good time. So the crazy part of the night was at the end of the night at 3:30 in the morning, as they're driving back to this apartment they rented, Richard says, no, drop me off in this park. And they're all looking at him. It's like a really dense park. And they go, why? He goes, I want to sleep here in the park. So he didn't feel safe with his friends in an apartment. He'd rather sleep in a park. That's how fucking crazy.
That's what I'm saying. It's crazy, man. And I guess, I mean, it's still to this day after our next show, we're gonna have a guy who went overseas. He served overseas, and I'm gonna get into some of those questions about, you know, where you lived over there, the way coming back over here. You hear about it in some movies. You see it where they can't sleep in the bed, where they have to sleep on the floor. It's just interesting that Richard would want to
slap some perspective on you.
Yeah.
This is mind blowing. You have to visually picture this. There's guys who go to Vietnam for a year, living like animals. Those are the guys, the grunts, the infantry, those guys out in the jungle.
Yeah.
When your year is up, you fly straight home. Nobody talks to you. You go straight 2 days from being in the jungle, fighting for your life, weapons, people trying to kill you, every booby trap, poison snakes, to, okay.
Go back, yeah.
Right, and that shock,
Yeah.
that transitional shock was just too much for a lot of those guys. The one thing I learned about, you know, from interviewing all those Vietnam guys, they all had trouble on their way back. Most of them kept the train on the tracks because of their family, their faith, strong friendship. But without those things, they float off like a Richard Flaherty. It's just too much for a human brain to go from war and killing and living in the jungle to, oh, you're fine, you're done. Go back on the street and be a normal person. Work in a normal store. It's a shock.
And Vietnam, and I could be misspoken here, but it was seen by a lot as, you know, not our war. As opposed to, you look at world wars where we're fighting against the Nazis and for the
common enemy.
Yeah.
All those guys.
So these guys are over there.
When they come back, nobody's saying welcome home. There's no parades. There's nothing. There is nothing. I started finding out so many TV stars. Like there's a guy who on Three's Company, the guy who plays Larry Dallas, he's an actor named Richard Klein, served with the 101st Airborne, saw some really ugly battles, never told anybody. There's the guy from Sanford and Son, the actor, the son who's Demond Wilson, same thing, went to Vietnam, fought, told nobody because it wasn't accepted. People would hate you for it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot like us as cops now. Yeah. Strangers who don't know me are judging me from one guy, from one incident that, you know, it's 1 in a million happens. Now you're judging me.
Yeah.
I feel bad when it happens to me. I can't imagine how shitty these people felt when the public turned on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in a whole different area, thinking that you're fighting for freedom, and then you come home and they're like, basically, you know, like
if the protesters, if you have a problem with that, you protest the government, you protest the politicians who sent you,
Yeah.
not the soldiers doing their job.
Yeah.
It's not the soldier to make a decision on is this a just war? They're going to war. They're trying to be, patriotic. Your argument is with the politicians.
That's kind of the same argument that I have, or point that I make. It's like, it's not law enforcement. We are enforcing a law. You need the law to change in
Right.
order for, you want that changed? You want us to stop enforcing this law? Well, you need that law to change, because right now it is legal to do X.
Right.
So that's kind of the same perspective.
There's so much more than people think answers. Everyone wants the simple answer today. Nobody wants to look at the complex answer. Everyone wants, how do you fix law enforcement? You got to fix the whole judicial system. It's the judges, it's the court systems. It's not just like, well, people in jail, they don't belong to be in jail. It's the cops' fault.
Yeah.
Really? What about the judges? What about the laws? What about the,
Yeah, I think when it reaches to a police officer's hands, that's just, there's so much beneath that we're just getting the end result, and that we have to put handcuffs on a person to take them. But there's so much behind that. What's wrong is that, you're going to see it at our level, because we make the arrest and bad things happen, and
Right.
you might get into a struggle, and we have to, police work's not pretty, we got to put you down to the ground. Oh my God, police. But how did that person get to the point where they meet us? And that's where the issue lies, and that's where no one really can understand. Just like, oh, the cops are bad. Yeah, well, you take away the cops, there's still going to be that issue, but you're never going to meet that boundary of police. It's going to be like, oh, and then victims and victims and victims, and they're going to continue doing what they're doing, because that's not, police are not the issue. It is whatever is driving that person to meet the police. But that's another topic. You brought some pants.
Yeah. You want to take a let's take a break. Let's take a break real quick.
Let's take a
before
break.
we go.
this will shock you guys, your audience.
Show me your pants.
You almost had a spit. You almost had a spit take.
Show me your pants.
So in his storage unit, besides all the documentation and things like that, or some of his uniforms, and this is actually his pants that he wore in Vietnam.
Here, Jay, you want to hold it up? So
Yeah,
so
I'll go in
you
the
can
background.
see how.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about Richard Flaherty is,
those look like capris.
right, if you tell somebody what 4'9" is, and then you see it,
Why don't you hold it up in the middle cam too?
it just makes it so much more remarkable
Look
what
at
he was
that.
able to accomplish, because it's just, until you could picture how small he physically was.
Yeah.
And the amazing things that he did, and
It's crazy.
he wore those pants in Vietnam as a lieutenant.
Did he ever wear anything to indicate that he was in the military when he was homeless?
Nope. That's the other interesting thing. I mean, think about how much easier his life could have been if
Yeah.
he was telling us he was a homeless vet, he was a Green Beret captain. He didn't. He didn't tell anybody. He
Right, you
kept
guys
it-
may have been able to link him up with a VA program or different stuff like
Well,
that.
he did.
Not
at the
not
end.
even not well. I tried at the end, but not even that. Just think about just how much better treatment he would have got from people.
Do you think it's twofolds? Either one, CIA stuff that he was doing, or two, he felt guilty for the stuff that he did in the military.
I think it's going to be a whole bunch of all that stuff mixed together.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah,
Because
there wouldn't have been one answer to that. It would have been a whole mixture.
Yeah, it kind of like I listened to you guys. If you're we weren't going to get too far into it because we're getting towards the end. But there's a whole bunch more, and there's a lot of little nuanced stories that you have to listen to. Check it out on Amazon Prime, The Giant Killer. Just search it up.
We'll have the link in the video, and we'll put it on the podcast.
The link,
and
but there
stuff.
are some crazy stories that they talk about, and you could tell how maybe he had some demons because some of the stuff that he did over there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's that one incident which it just kind of reminds me a lot of the movie Lone Survivor, where in the movie Lone Survivor, which is obviously the true story, that they took a hostage, not a hostage, I'm sorry, they took a prisoner, and it was a kid, and they had to decide, he's going to mess up our mission, he's going to give away our position. What do we do? Do we kill him, or do we, risk our own lives? And they made that decision there to let him go, and then you see what happened. The whole unit got wiped out.
You're talking about in Lone Survivor.
In Lone Survivor.
Yeah.
So that was a situation once with Richard on a double mission. It's in the documentary. It's controversial. And that's the thing is, I could have cut out things in the documentary to make him look as pure, but I needed to tell the story the way it really was so people can really understand. And that was a situation where they took some prisoners, and Richard's unit was exposed, and the enemy, they were in an enemy area where they were being hit before many times, and Richard wanted to get out of there, and he said, hey, I think they have to go. And that's controversial.
This-
but I was never in his shoes to judge him. I was never there where I
Absolutely.
had to bring those men home and say, is it their lives or those prisoners' lives that matter?
You're in a different, unimaginable situation that he had to go through, and decisions he had to make out there. And I'm sure that he was dealing with those decisions, coming back to. It's almost like you disconnect and you come back to the quote unquote real world, which is the way we live here, and you're like, holy shit, what did I do over there? That's nuts. So and you can bury that for a long time. Eventually, it's gonna come up and bubble up.
Yeah.
So this guy here, he's been on crazy missions. He's been in foxholes. He got shot at. Grenades blew up next to him. All this stuff happened to him. He lives under a tree and he gets hit by a car. That's how the story ends of this guy's life. Not the story, but his life ends there. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, the creation of new stories for him ended there.
There's a couple questions because in the documentary it says he was walking, it's clear line of sight. Guy's walking there. He didn't dart out into traffic. You said he had stage 4 cancer. Maybe a little suicide. Maybe I'm at the end. I told this guy my life story. And I told him to look into it, and I just want to end it because I'm going to die anyways. I'm going to go into I don't know, the DUI, I had an issue with it. You want to tell a little bit about the incident, and then I'm telling you guys, watch this stuff. Watch it on Amazon Prime, and then you guys can come up with a conclusion of yourself. But go ahead.
I don't think it was a suicide, but of course anything is possible. I do know he spoke to his cousins. Those are the only people in his family he spoke to were his cousins. And his only fear was to die in a hospital of cancer. That is true. But the thing is...
So it's late at night.
It's late at night. I think it was after 12 maybe. So it's starting the next day. He's crossing the street. He gets hit by a Prius. He flies about 15 feet in the air, lands. He's probably still semi-conscious. He's bleeding out in the bushes, and the car flees. We pulled the video, obviously. We picked up the video, and we had an open homicide investigation. So we're pulling video. We got pieces of the car to match. And then the lead investigator was a guy named Harvey Arango, our traffic homicide lead investigator. He gets a call from the Miami-Dade homicide unit, and they said, we think we have the subject of your hit and run here. So Harvey's like, why would they turn themselves in there? And they're like, well, she's one of our employees. Oof. So my guy raced over there and did the interviews and everything. This is where it gets, things go a little bit sideways. I mean, the whole fucking thing is sideways. But this is where it really goes sideways is, she kind of really took her time before turning herself in. She certainly knew she hit my friend that night. She claims that it was a palm frond, that she didn't know if she hit a barrier or something. After she hits my friend, she walks back to the crime scene, claiming that she didn't know what she hit. She lived maybe 3 blocks away. She parked her car, and we pulled the video of her, and it's in the documentary, of her walking around her car, checking the car. There's blood on the car. The car front, on the Prius, they have that little side window. That thing was smashed. The A-frame, that big metal bar on your window, was smashed. I mean, if you hit a 97-pound man in a Mack truck or a Hummer, maybe you can say I didn't know. But he landed on the hood of the car. He bounced. He flew in the air. How she can claim she didn't see him? And then she gets into work and she tells the story. So where everything really just goes sideways is my department finishes our paperwork, ready to do the arrest, and the state attorney comes forward and just says, there's just not enough evidence that she knew she hit a human being, and we're not going to charge her. Nothing. And my department said, yeah, we're going to arrest her. And I said, well, you arrest her, then you're opening yourself up to all the several ramifications because we don't believe there's enough evidence to prosecute her.
Wow.
Okay.
So that's how it ends. And
not only that, there was a call to the insurance where she admits that she hit something.
Right.
She doesn't know what it was.
So the night of the
So there's evidence there.
Yeah, the night of the hit and run, she's not calling the police after this big crash. She's calling her insurance company to get someone out first thing in the morning to fix her car. She wanted her car. I don't go too much into her. I tried making contact. My opinion about her is a person, besides having an alcohol problem, is severely disturbed, mentally disturbed from people I've talked to and videos I've seen of her. And
she went viral in another video that we were discussing maybe off break, that this lady is not and not even from this incident, from another incident.
Right.
I don't know if you have it, or were you able to pull that up?
Oh, I didn't look it up.
Ah, well, what is she? Basically, millions of views. She's in her department's uniform. She's not a police officer. She's a civilian.
Civilian employee.
Yeah.
She was a court stenographer from Miami-Dade homicide. And remember, guys, let's not put anything on Miami-Dade homicide. They had nothing,
Yeah.
There was no cover-up. There's nothing like that. They immediately turned her over to us. But she was up in Boca Raton. So this is about a year and a half ago. She was up in Boca Raton wearing a Miami-Dade police homicide jacket. And I guess she got into a little fender bender in a parking lot, and she was drunk, and she's screaming and yelling, and she goes into a lot of really anti-Semitic stuff, calling people Jews and dirty Jews and all sorts of stuff, Democrats and dirty Jews. The crazy part of the story is allegedly she's Jewish, but I don't know anything about her. But that video went viral. It was spread around the world, because of how nasty it was, the anti-Semitism with somebody wearing a police jacket.
Yeah.
People not knowing that's not really a cop and blah, blah, blah. I mean, Miami-Dade immediately put out a statement saying that she doesn't work for us anymore and we have nothing to do with her.
This is the same lady that
killed my friend.
Killed your friend.
So, she's not famous for killing my friend, but she gets famous. But, it is what it is.
Wow.
And you think his background had something to do with everything? What does your gut tell you as far as this and everything that's, what can you I know as a former police officer, you're still a cop at heart and you don't want to make any accusations, but what do you say, like, if you had to start in a direction to say, let's solve the reason or whatever, where would you go with that?
Well, are you saying like the idea that this could possibly be a hit? Let's talk about what Richard told me really quick, because this is even going to make it insinuated even more. The only one thing Richard didn't want me looking into was the undercover case he worked with the ATF, with the agent's name was Gluffy. That was the only thing he said, Dave, I want you to cover my whole life story, but don't. But I'm a detective, and I need to know all the facts, so I did contact the agent. I found him. Took me a couple of days to get Agent Gluffy's phone number. That was the week that Richard was alive. So I called that agent on Friday, May 8th in the afternoon. I call him. That's my first contact with him to find out if any parts of this ATF undercover operation story are true. And the agent says everything he told you is true. That night, Richard gets killed. So here you have Richard telling me, do not contact these people because it's going to be bad for your career and dangerous for my health.
Yeah.
So obviously, yes, the first thing I thought was, holy shit, I just got my friend killed in a hit.
Yeah.
It triggered something. But extraordinary accusations require extraordinary proof.
Exactly.
And it just I've never found any evidence that she was some sort of plant from the CIA or that she was given some sort of instruction to kill him and think about how hard that would have been to set up that whole thing.
Yeah.
But and then when you see the video of her being drunk, that's the most obvious,
Yeah.
choice.
It's just, I don't know, coincidental?
Coincidental is that, obviously, listen, the minute I heard he was, I got a knock on my door at 5 a.m. from one of my guys in uniform that next day saying, Dave, your friend just got killed. And I'm like, the first things in my mind is, holy shit.
Yeah.
He told me not to contact the agent. But, that was just coincident.
Yeah, and that's so fresh in your mind because it just happened. So
Right. So it's like, just what a strange set of circumstances that occurred.
Okay, so we have to have evidence as police officers.
Right.
We could have a hunch,
Right.
but we also are like, coincidental? Ha ha! I think not. And then you have to dig and figure out, but maybe yes, maybe no, who knows?
Listen, anything in this world is possible.
Yeah.
And obviously, a lot of the people who follow the story, that's their first thing is, I don't care what the officer says, this was a hit. I'm not there yet, guys. I mean, I need to see something. I'm still digging. And if somebody's got something, I'm still digging. But I'm just looking at it as a DUI with a person who was familiar with the system and who had to get around it. And the question is, well, why didn't the state attorney charge them? State attorney, I spoke to them, and, as much as I could, it wasn't my case.
Yeah.
But my guys did press for the arrest. They went back to a Supreme Court, Florida Supreme Court case, similar to what I said earlier, where a giant truck ran over a kid on a skateboard, and the guy had no idea he hit the kid on the skateboard, and that was his defense. And they said, well, in that case, it was a hit and run, and he didn't know. Yeah, that was a huge SUV. We're talking about a Prius where he hit the front. She knew she hit my friend. Yeah. I mean, unless she was so incoherent at the time of driving, that how else could you not have seen a 100-pound man who smashes your windshield, flies in the air, his shoes fly off, and you saying, I don't know, I hit a human being?
I was looking at the video because there's a video of the lady that she steps out of her apartment. She goes into her apartment, steps out, and walks, circles her vehicle, looks at the damage. And I'm looking for those steps that are maybe out of line. I'm like, I need some evidence saying that this lady was on drugs. She just looks, man, I don't know. It's hard to say, but she just looks wacky.
Yeah.
She just looks like a wacky lady.
Yeah, but the other thing is she is wearing high heels, and she's not stumbling as bad as so-and-so. Listen, she certainly could have had a very high blood alcohol content and just being, one of those people that can handle alcohol better than others. But it's a tough case.
It's interesting. It's interesting that he held all this stuff for so long. Then he opens up, and shortly after, he's dead. So that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
It's just coincidence. I don't know. It's just tough, man. But I'm glad you're here to tell it, and I'm glad you're continuing to dig on this and find out. Maybe it was a hit. Maybe you don't want to find that out, because we need you back on the show, man.
They always say, don't ask questions,
Exactly.
There are some things like, will someday I ever go to Venezuela and follow? I have the clues to follow his path. I know the hotels he stayed at. Will I ever do that someday? Yeah, maybe. Maybe. There'll be a part 2.
Calling all units. Calling all units. Donut shot has a fresh dozen. Go ahead and take a 1040.